My job is to make the air visible. We see the wind as wonderful things where the birds, murmurings they're called, where they flock and make these patterns in the air, and they work in hundreds of them all together. Or in an aquarium or in the ocean, where you can see schools of fish moving together, undulating slowly like a flying carpet. There's nothing more magical than that. Clouds in the sky, of course, the wind in a field of wheat or hay, making patterns on the grass. I went out a couple of days ago and looked at the wind frame across the meadow from my shop, and the movement of the wind on the grass was much more compelling than the piece I'd made. It was just so magical, and these two forms were dancing against each other. Those are the great moments that keep you going. I was born in New York City, but I spent my youth here in Cornwall because it was summers and weekends here. There's a lake here in Cornwall. We had a fleet of little sailboats, sort of one-person sailboats my father designed. So that's my first connection with the wind, was learning how to sail on an inland lake. And later on, when I was in the Navy, I was a navigator off the aircraft carriers. So that's the job of navigating and dealing with the wind. I don't know what the problem is. Oh dear, something's wrong. I always had this theory that the ideal piece, which I would spend my life trying to make, would be a piece that looked ordered at some point, where you had a rigid construction on a grid or some similar pattern that was recognizable. And then with a puff of air, it would move into something that was completely chaotic. And it would cross the line between order and chaos.
Even if you hadn't seen his work, you'd heard about Tim Prentice. He had a presence in the Connecticut art scene. I think it was probably 1988 that I first went up to Cornwall and visited his studio, which, at the time was an incredible experience. Really, anyone who's been to Tim's studio, it leaves an impression. You're not going to forget it anytime soon. We're in this era now, the Anthropocene, where we're dealing with climate change, and we're acknowledging how much we've messed with the Earth's atmosphere. And Tim's work makes you aware of the very air we breathe. You could look at Tim's work and think of all sorts of things in the natural world. You could think of leaves, you could think of clouds, you could think of snowflakes. There's a real connection with the way wind moves the physical world.
I was taken on a high school trip in the Boston area to the Addis Museum in Andover, Mass. And in the lobby was a Calder. And I was transfixed by it, and my little group of fellow students went through the building for an hour and a quarter or something like that, looking at 19th century landscapes and portraits, and when they left the building, I was still in the lobby. I never got past the Calder. I thought it looked like it was defying gravity. So I think that's actually where the hook went in.
The piece, it changed my life, which I saw when I was 14 or something like that, at the Addison Gallery. Had a wire base, 3 feet, I think, like this, and and then the usual Calder things hanging on it, spinning around and balancing. Red, as I recall, and white.
The word mobile is suggested to Calder by Duchamp because it means in French furniture, which is something you move around like we move this table around. And it's become so totally connected with Calder that it's like he owns the word. Kinetic sculpture is just a slightly more fancy word or even more pretentious. I haven't thought of a magic word for it, and Duchamp isn't around anymore to suggest it, but I'm happy with kinetic sculpture. You're behaving yourself very nicely, thank you. Much better than earlier. And what's out of line? Let's see. It became a hobby, totally. I started with coat hangers, where a lot of people start. I had some roommates at college, and I had made a hanging piece in the middle of the living room. And every now and again, it would assume a certain position that had a special quality to it. And the room would fall silent, and we'd all look up at this piece while it did it. So that was my first success and my first audience. As a student at Yale, I met Albers. He had been at Black Mountain after he got out of Germany in the nick of time. And then he came to Yale. I, of course, knew his reputation and knew his work. I was majoring in architecture. I took his color course as an undergraduate, and as a graduate, when I came back 4 years later, I took the same course again and learned probably just as much as I learned the first time around. Albers was, for many of us, a kind of magician. The discipline that he had to take everything away except the point of the composition that he was doing. In other words, no brushwork, no subject matter, no reference to history, no figurative elements of any kind, abstract utterly, so that he could isolate everything except the color. And now, as you know, the painting's homage to the square, 3 colors, uninflected, 3 solid colors directly out of the tube. And I admired the discipline to hold on to that. It was not easy. I thought if I could emulate that discipline, doing the same thing with motion, I would have a chance of finding a new form. Any space that's occupied by human beings has got air movement in it. Even sitting here, I'm giving off a little tiny mushroom cloud of heat going up out of my head like that. And if you put a very delicate piece over my head, it would move just from that and nothing else. And it sounds like I'm pulling somebody's leg when I say that I try to make the air visible. There's a quotation from Yeats, I think, that describes the difference between the dance and the dancer. I'm not making the dance, the wind is making the dance. The biggest thing I think being in the service did for me was to get me out of the New England bubble of Ivy League smugness and into the world with people from different backgrounds. I went back to graduate school, which was a 3-year hitch, and eventually went out and got a job in the big city. Yep, I sought my fortune in New York, and I worked for another architect for a year, and then got a second partnership with Lo Yi Chan, who had been working for IMPay. And Prentice and Chan did all this work to supply low-cost and middle-income subsidized housing for New York City. Not a great opportunity for aesthetic expression, really, but good experience, absolutely. The housing was needed, so that was satisfying. We always tried to make a courtyard for the community and the people in the building to meet. Well, it was an extraordinary program. We liberals learned a lot about our pomposity. More fun with individual houses that I designed up in the country in Northwest Connecticut. Single family, custom designed, looking for a balance of my training in the modern movement and my fascination and love of the simplicity and the lack of pretension of the traditional New England barn. And the truth is, I got a lot of satisfaction out of those years, but I never actually felt I had found my voice. And when I switched to sculpture, I was still doing houses. Some years the sculpture supported the architecture, and some years it was the other way around. But I found my voice in the kinetic field just before the lights went out on my architectural career. I found my voice.
Tim had the advantage, and you could say perhaps even the disadvantage at the same time, of starting to make his mature work in the 1970s, when there was this implementation across the United States with public architecture, where a percent of the cost of building a new building was to go into art. So he started doing public art and became very successful with it. And his career basically was an arc of following the expansion of public art programs across the country and the world, too. Not that he didn't have gallery exhibitions, but the scale of these spaces allowed him to expand these pieces. And I think, Tim does make small objects, and they're amusing and fascinating and beautiful. But I think the work really stands on its own, starts singing when he starts getting into scale. And the scale was provided by these public spaces.
The big breakthrough that I got commercially when I had absolutely no record as a kinetic sculptor was to get a job for AT&T. They had a hook in their atrium in Bedminster, New York, and the engineer told me that the hook would take 3,000 pounds. So like a kid with an allowance, I spent every bit of it. And the piece weighs probably more than all the work we did for the next 10 years put together at 3,000 pounds. One of the lures of going into kinetic sculpture was that in practicing architecture, particularly with the smaller projects, I would come on the construction site and direct people who knew more about their crafts than I would ever know. And I felt a little bit like a conductor of an orchestra who couldn't play any of the instruments. So now I'm happy to say that I've had the satisfaction of working with my hands. I had a mixed message coming in from my father, who was successful architecturally with his traditional design commitment. But when he came home weekends, he went into his shop and made furniture, and he made wonderful toys. The expression of his love for that was so much more than I ever saw him express for his career. I thought that can't be right. And so I wanted to get it right side up. You know, musicians say they don't go to work, they play. They play their instruments. And of course, I find that the most difficult thing of all, to play. I have to say, okay, what's it going to be for? Where's it going to go? How much is it going to cost? How fast do I have to do it? What's the deadline? I have to turn it into work and then I can go. But to just play is something that I find elusive. Of all the many things that Alexander Calder taught was it's okay for grown-ups to play. He was a great guy for playing. George Rickey, who's my other inspiration, doesn't so much, he's like me, he works all the time. Calder was interested in balance and expressed that. And Rickey was interested in movement and expressed that. I built up enough confidence in some pieces I'd made that I would show them to the master, George Rickey. And I'd put him in the old VW bus we had and slammed the back down and drove up to where his place was in New York State. And he was kind enough to come out and meet me. And I showed him my little humble offerings. And there was a long pause, and he dropped this statement into my consciousness like dropping a stone into a deep well, and said, "Where are the limits?" This is a characteristic piece by George Rickey. He calls them sedges, and he's made them 40 feet tall. And they're dependent upon the wind, as you can see. They're very diffident. They take their time. They say, maybe I'll move and maybe I won't. So they're mysterious. He lived north of here, north and a little west, at about an hour and a quarter drive, and Calder lived southeast of here, a little less than an hour. So I like to think that we're on a line of mastery between Rickey and Calder, and we're at the halfway point. They're balanced on knife edges, so there's as little friction as possible. And where are the limits? The limits are that they can only move in one direction. And it doesn't seem like a limit at all. Obscure glass, you know, that you have in the door to a bathroom or something like that. You can't see any detail, but the light comes through. These are translucent Lexan, and they hold the light, and these reflect the light and send it back. And if you hold this up against the sky, it's black. If you hold these up against the sky, they glow in a very nice way. So there's a huge contrast. This is a maximum difference, reflectivity and absorption. But if there's any air in the scene, the air will make the design. This is a toy for the wind.
I've become incredibly enamored of the zingers. Even the smallest breeze will start them in motion. On windy days, these do get tangled, and we've become very adept at untangling them. They're obviously not an organic object, yet there's a life to them, the way they ripple, like a vertebrae, a snake. There's a presence almost like a living being, actually, on the campus of the museum. So many of the people who are in the world of kinetic sculpture, Calder, George Rickey, all of them have backgrounds connected to either architecture or engineering, and Tim follows, very much in their footsteps. But Tim's work is quite different. I mean, his major contribution was this idea of creating a structure which is flexible, which retains a certain form but changes in relationship to the air, the movement of the air. I mean, the analogy would be a flag. It has an infinite number of permutations when the wind is blowing it around, yet it still remains a rectangle of cloth. But you see the rippling effect of the wind. You actually see the wind. The wind is revealed to you. The wind is made visible.
Philip Guston was an artist in New York who was an abstract expressionist, but he disappeared for 3 or 4 years up in the Woodstock area and came out completely different artist, as if there's no connection with who he'd been beforehand. And he used to tell the story, you go into the studio and you're just packed in there with all the people you've ever met. Your parents, your children, your students, your teachers, neighbors, your fellow artists, critics. You can't move. And if you wait long enough and are patient enough, one by one they get bored and they wander off. And pretty soon, if you're really lucky and stick to it, you're all alone. But you're not done yet. You have to wait till you leave. Then you can get to work. You're then free. You've been freed. You have to get rid of all your own preconceptions. You're one of the people that has to leave the room. If you want to start from scratch and do something utterly original that's never existed before.
So where are you?
I've never been alone there.
You've never...
I've never gotten it far. I'm thinking I'm still trying to leave the studio.
Book of the Tao by Lao Tzu. It's sufficiently abstract that if you understand it, you're on the wrong track entirely. Good theory. All roads lead to nowhere. And for those of us who are potters or kinetic sculptors, we give up our work to forces over which we have no control, so that we have a sort of affinity with the Tao.
This is David Colbert, who walked into my apartment in New York 40 years ago.
41 almost?
41 years ago, and was looking for people in New York who were interested in geometry. And finally, he wound up in my living room. He wasn't looking for a job, and I wasn't looking for an assistant. And that was 41 years ago, and the rest is history.
So we'll just have them do a smaller scale with the curve. Okay.
Heaps of them.
Yeah.
Something good for a big fish to eat. Plankton.
Small fish. When I first arrived here, it was end of October, early November, 81.
And there's often a top.
It was dreary, it was cold, spitting rain. I had an assignment. It would be to make, let's say, 100 widgets. 100 of these or something much more complicated, like 100 of these. It was like a kind of meditation. I would make every 100 widgets one bend at a time.
Okay, so Dave, we discussed this piece yesterday, and you recommended that we turn this plate vertical rather than horizontal so it won't get caught and we get a better reflection from looking at the piece.
Artists are so often just lone wolves who are, known for a certain thing. Working with David Colbert and accepting him as a co-producer of the work says a lot about Tim's personality.
From that loop up there so that we could...
How many artists are willing to take on another generation of artists to evolve a practice?
Loop the other way, and my efforts to make this work 90 degrees from where it was have not borne fruit so far, so that's where I'm at. I still am obsessed with the idea that there's a way of doing it, but I haven't found it yet.
In terms of how it would work, this has a similar issue that some of the other ones had that, it's able to do that, and then it'll kind of stay there.
Get out of its slot, yeah.
And then
David has become a true partner in the creation of it, and the two of them play off one another in a beautiful way.
So that is an aspect of this.
And I think it says a lot about Tim's lack of ego and the fact that what he really cares about is the creative process.
To my eyes, it would be very airy when seen from a lot of the angles. You're going to see through it because of this.
Yeah. That I don't mind. Depends on
Okay.
the light, of course, because these will pick up light from backlit, and this will pick up
Right.
light from side. My eye guy that I went to in New York to get a new prescription for my glasses looked in my eyes and he said, "You've got drues," a word I'd never heard of, which is sort of garbage lying, I guess, in the bottom of the retina, something like that. But anyway, this was news to me because I didn't think I had any problem with my eyesight, but he said I should go have them looked at. I went to the doctor, and in my back pocket I put the current issue of the New Yorker magazine, and when I opened it in the waiting room, there was an article about macular degeneration by one of the staff writers who had just discovered he has it. So I learned about it 5 or 6 minutes before I went in to see the doctor to tell me I had it. And they said, "You've got macular." As you know, it's slow. So you sort of adjust incrementally to each new level. It doesn't drop dramatically, but it's a soft, slow decline, like watching a face grow old. You don't notice it day to day or even month to month, but it's always changing, and you're always slowly losing it. I can play a trick if I want to see the moon. I don't look straight at it. I move up and slightly to the left, and it pops up, but I'm not looking at it. I'm looking upper left. And the minute I drop down to look at the moon, which is irresistible, it's gone. So the dark joke is you can see everything except what you're looking at. And just a second, and make a zigzag clip that, shoot. Okay, yeah, here we go.
As Tim's vision has deteriorated, he still is able to bend the wire.
If I could see it and do it.
He has this pair of glasses with this incredible lens on it, where he's able to see things close up, and he still is able to do that work.
It's got to have some spring in it so that...
The thing is, he's been working this way for such a period of time now that he understands these systems intuitively. He doesn't need necessarily to see these things. He can see them in his mind.
It's going to be like this, let's say.
I guess what I'm talking about is body memory. There's a body memory.
One that follows. Either I didn't realize how much we feel with our fingers and always have, or I didn't realize that they would do that because I never used that facility. I didn't need it the way I need it now, and I see with my fingers. And when I'm looking for a detail, the fingers would tell me before the eyes will tell me, often. I mean, these corners are all welded, for instance, and I can tell if they're just sitting there or if they're actually welded by sliding my fingernail along the wire. And if it catches at a place, that's where the weld distorted the surfaces of the wire but I don't see it, I can feel it. The wire has the one happy quality of agreeing with whatever you tell it to do. You make a bend and it's wrong, you can re-bend it. And it says, okay, I don't mind. And you can keep doing it for the longest time. We did a piece for a bank in Texas, in the main entrance space where all the tellers are surrounding you. And it was written in the contract that it must be silent. Because there's always this, if you're outside, you get this all the time, which is pleasant. But inside, they want people to not be distracted from writing out their checks, I guess. You'll see in the barn some sound pieces, which are just basically homemade instruments with no role for the wind, just your imagination to play them. I guess you saw them, maybe. Scherzo for shower shoe. Music and kinetic sculpture have a lot in common in terms of the devices and repetition, for example, and they both exist through time. So there's a beginning and the end and the middle, and the contrast when the wind is up and the piece is frantic and moving quickly and changing. That happens in passages of music. There's a variation in another passage in symphonies, for example. The music can also slow down and be soothing and calming, and otherwise get wound up and be exciting and busy. And kinetic sculpture does the same. Early music I'm fond of. Chamber music, small-scale music, so I can hear the parts. Stravinsky. My wife and I, we got a grant from the State Department when there was grants for such things to go around the world singing folk songs because we were amateur folk singers. In India and Thailand and that part, particularly East Africa. And this is when we were first married. So as a music maker, I had something of a career, but mostly I've loved listening to music all my life.
Days are breaking in my soul. Some are down in the valley praying. Some are down in the valley praying. Some are down in the valley praying. Days are breaking in my soul.
Well, there's music in the workshop all day long. If I'm really concentrating, I don't hear it. But as soon as I stop concentrating on something else, it's back again.
Tim, I'd say that all the time you're hungry to have a breakthrough.
Right. Get a new idea, develop it.
And I'm much more hungry to improve something.
Right.
And so I want to take something good and make it better. And you want
And I want to take nothing and make it good.
Yes, exactly. Even now to this day.
Never saw it so clearly. The questions can get pretty elusive and pretty zen-like, like why art in the first place? Why call it art? Or are you really contributing to society's well-being? I mean, we would install a piece at an airport, for example, and somebody would come up and say, okay, what is it? And at the end of my effort to describe it to some woman at a recent installation, she says, yes, what's it for? And I said, it's to dispel, build up a static electricity. And she was completely satisfied with this phony answer because it was useful. Humor is something that doesn't crop up in public art that much. Corporations are sort of hard to psych. The thing they fear more than losing money is whimsy. It's challenging and terrifying and frightening to them. That's too bad because whimsy lifts my spirits. And when I'm making peace for myself, one of the things I want to achieve is whimsy. We know certain things that are going to be popular and are going to be approved of, generally speaking. That knowledge I wish I could bury and eliminate, but it's still there. You get inspired by somebody and then you spend the rest of your life trying to get out from under their shadow. But within the last year, I don't feel the need of going to other artists for inspiration because I know what I want to do and say. But I have a clearer picture now than I ever had about what I want to do.
Let's pause for a second, see if this cloud passes.
Now that's saying you don't accept nature's response here.
It's true.
And you're not letting the wind control the situation. You're not giving over to the wind. A childlike memory of wonder. We lose that. We become cynical. We know it all. We're not expecting to be moved by surprise. To see resilient, stiff, metal material become sensuous, to be able to do that much with that little, is something that would move me every time, I would say.
Don't mind the rain or the rolling sea. The weary nights never worry me. But the saddest time in a sailor's day is to watch the sun as it dies away.
Thank